OMG, you guys. I can't even start out by saying that who I am and what I do because I'm just so effervescent after this interview. Okay. All right. Let me get my shit together. I'm Sarah Bueno. Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. I have just finished interviewing Tanya Markul, who, if you are on Instagram, maybe some of you have seen her as at Thug Unicorn. And of course, I was drawn to Thug Unicorn because you all know I love unicorns. That is my spirit animal. It is me. And I reached out to her a while ago, and we've been trying to schedule this interview and going back and forth on dates. And she's in Denmark and I'm in Chicago, so the time difference was also a challenge. But I can't tell you how happy I am to have met this beautiful, exciting, wonderful person. So let me tell you a little bit more about Tanya. The path of Tanya Markul is one of the poetess, the intuitive, and wounded healer. An unwanted child, she was raised on barren soil of shame, guilt, and self-hatred. From the womb, her inner navigation was tainted with an ancestry of addiction, instability, abuse, and fear. Her journey to self-healing and to become ready to guide others has included many arduous paths, risks, and rebirths. A guide to the other side of pain, Tanya heals with words, the unseen world, sensitivity, and vulnerability. She's dedicated to helping others heal themselves by holding sacred space for their stories and by unlocking the possibility of shape-shifting their pain into soul-led purpose. Her medicine beckons the brave curiosity to look within, brings a sense of humor to cracked surfaces, unveils the beauty of hidden authenticity, and conjures the courage to love and accept oneself in this lifetime. So I'm holding the She book, and that's the She book, 3 different words, and I just wanted to read a couple of passages for you. It's a compilation. I don't know if Tanya would call it this, but I'm calling it a compilation of poems and just thoughts. So I'm going to read a couple pieces to you that I found really profound. 18. Your darkness will come, and when it does, let it hold you. Let it whisper in your ear a story of gut-wrenching love, of heartbreak, of snowstorms and drought, of what can't be understood. And no, it will sometimes feel like pain, but it doesn't mean to hurt you because it knows you've suffered enough. Let's see what else we got in here. 28. Sit in the darkness if you want to feel better, because there is no other way out of this mess. Be still and feel until you can't tell where you begin and the shadow ends. It will scare you with depth and spook you with its glory. Let it show you a new way and a stronger, softer, more magical you. How about maybe one more? 77. Bringing light to your darkness is nothing compared to deciding what you're going to do with all that power. And I think that's a perfect place to end, to segue into hearing my conversation with Tanya. Just a note, her little baby King Arthur, his name is not King, I'm calling him King Arthur. Her little baby Arthur joins us partway through, and he has a lot to say as well. So I apologize if it's distracting, but I found it also quite endearing while I was speaking with Tanya. So please enjoy my interview with Tanya Markul. Hello, Tanya. Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. How are you?
Hi. Thank you so much. I'm great, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
OMG. Anyone with unicorn in their name anywhere is already my best friend.
Love that.
Yeah. So I've been following you on Instagram for years, and it's so funny. Like, I don't even think about sometimes Instagram people being people. Like when it's an account like Thug Unicorn and there weren't any photos for a long time, it was just quotes. I didn't even think about you being an amazing, wonderful, beautiful, fairy-like human. And then I started looking into who was behind Thug Unicorn, and I was so excited to see your story because I'm really excited to dig into your story today.
Oh my gosh.
You're like, oh shit.
Shit. Let's do it. Okay.
Yeah. So, and you can start wherever you want, but if you don't mind telling the listeners who you are and what you do, take it wherever you want it to go.
Yes. I mean, I guess in my most basic form, I'm a human being trying to be one. I'm a mama. I have 2 boys. One is 4 years old, and his name is Albert Leo. And I have a 6-month-old whose name is Arthur Holga. Yeah, they're so cute, little Viking fairy babies.
No.
And yeah, And I guess, I mean, I call myself a writer and soon to be an officially published writer with Andrews McMeel in the States, which is incredible and totally awesome. And I'm a poet. So I've been writing for most of my life. And I started writing poetry and making books like when I first knew of books. Like I would like scribble lines across the paper and I'd fold it all up and like staple it or like weave it together with yarn. And I would give them to like my aunts and my grandma and grandpa as gifts. And I would tell them it was, you know, a book of, you know, some kind of story I made up in my head, or I would call it poetry.
Wow.
Yeah. And I wrote my first book when I was 6 years old.
Oh.
And it was called Little Baby Boohoo.
Oh, please tell me you have it somewhere.
My mom must have it somewhere. I know that she does. It's probably somewhere, you know, in the basement, tucked away in some old, beautiful suitcase. But I'm sure it's there, breathing. I can feel its pulse. But yeah, I wrote this book and it was called Little Baby Boohoo. And it was about a baby that cried all the time. And it was about me. The book was about me. And yeah, and, you know, I had teenage parents and they decided that they didn't want to raise me. So I was adopted by my grandparents and raised by my grandparents. And the trauma of not having them in my life was very big. And especially for my mother. So I had this like gaping mother wound for my like entire childhood, teenage, you know, years, and then becoming a mother myself also, you know, tears off the Band-Aid off of these old wounds, and you just see life and yourself and your childhood in a different way. But I wrote my second book when I was like 8, and it was about a princess who was to go into the forest to find a lover, because that's where lovers were, in the forest.
Of course, duh.
Yeah, of course. But the idea was that the princess would go into the forest, find a lover, and come home. And the princess was my mother. And I thought that if she would, you know, I used to pray to God and you know, pray to the universe that my mom would find somebody, because I thought if she found like a man that made her happy, then she would come home to me. And that never happened. She never found her man and she never came home.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a little bit tragic, but I've been writing from a really young age, and it just was something that came really natural to me. Yeah.
That's awesome. And it's funny, as you started talking about your parents, and I knew that story of your parents giving you up for adoption. Mother wound was totally coming to my mind even before you said it. I was like, mother wound, here we go. And I so identify with that as well. And I think the mother-daughter relationship is the most complicated relationship on the planet.
Oh my God.
Right?
I could not. Yes. I mean, I could not agree more with you. And I'm actually writing a book right now, like a book, like a story about justice. It's about the mother wound and like my personal experience with my mother, because that experience, that is my Mount Everest in this life. Like that is the thing for me that completely destroyed me. Like I knew that I was unwanted in my mother's womb. You know, I mean, she was 15 years old, and like she had all like the shame and the guilt, and she tried to hide me for, you know, as long as she could, for no one to see. And, you know, all the resentment that went along with her having a child at such a young age. Like I was birthed into that. Yeah. You know, I came out with all this stuff, and on top of that, like it was built into my cells, and then she had completely rejected and abandoned me. But it didn't matter for me. And I think most of us who are abandoned and, you know, rejected by our mothers, we still love them. We still crave. Like we crave them, you know, and it's not just about approval. It has turned into approval for me. Like, I'm the queen of like self-sabotaging myself because, you know, these are like super old patterns of not feeling worthy, not feeling worthy of my beauty, of my art, of my expression, of taking up space, of like eating healthy, of feeling good, of
Yeah.
feeling really great in my life. So, I mean, it's such a huge, huge experience for me. And I know for so many others, and it's not something that we necessarily publicly talk about.
Yeah.
Because it's like this taboo thing. And
Yep.
for me, like I never told anybody like how I grew up. All my friends in high school didn't know. Like nobody just came to my house. Like
Wow.
nobody knew my story. And so, but I was so like insecure, and I was so afraid to tell anyone because I didn't want people to judge me. I didn't want people to be like, Tanya, that happened to you because you do suck. You are ugly, you are unworthy, you are unlovable, and that's why those things happen to you, because you're a shitty person, And so I kept it hidden for a really long time. And yeah, I mean, there came a point in my life where I couldn't run from it anymore. I completely, God is my baby. Should I just go grab him?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. We're back.
Is he going to join us now?
He's going to join us. So
Yay.
we might hear some cute little sounds in the background.
Oh, that won't be terrible. Cute little baby coos.
Yeah, or little screams or little grunts.
Oh.
However he's feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, so you were talking about... Yeah, go ahead.
We?
You hadn't shared for a really long time.
Yes. So, I mean, there's more to my story than just the mother wound, but I was, my grandparents, they both passed away. One passed away when I was 10 and the other passed away when I was 14, which is insanely traumatic. And I was kind of handed around to a few family members that didn't really want me, but took me in because I had nowhere else to go. And most of my family has suffered. I mean, a majority, my aunts and uncles have, unfortunately, gone through a period of alcoholism or drug abuse. And, we come from a super low income background, like fear of, not being able to make it, fear of not being able to pay the bills, instability, addiction, shame, like all of it. My mother abandoning me on top of, having this just really not a steady or strong foundation, to hold me. I had to grow up really fast.
Yep.
I knew that in a way that I was the only one who was really, looking out for me. And I also knew how, kind of helpless you are as a child. It's really a deep surrendering into your situation and kind of waiting and praying and just trying to do the best that you can until you can get out of there.
Yeah.
It's really hard. So I didn't tell anybody my struggle until, I started opening up when I was close to 30. And I was having this, I came to Europe and I put the giant, salty Atlantic Ocean between myself and the toxicity of my roots, ultimately because I needed to heal. At the time I was just taking a job overseas and was excited, to go and do that. But spiritually, my path was leading me here to heal. And there came a time where I just started having the most horrible anxiety attacks. I would be sitting at work and the room would get super dizzy, or I couldn't breathe. I would feel like I was seeing stars and had to go sit down and really wait until I could move again.
Wow.
And at the same time, I was having these I think they're called night frights. When you kind of fall asleep and soon after you fall asleep, you have a very intense panic attack.
Mm.
And I was having those, and that, I mean, that was the worst feeling. Like anybody who has experienced that, like I feel you so much because it is really scary. And before I like knew what was happening, I even took myself one night to, I lived across the street from a hospital, and I even walked over at like 1 o'clock in the morning because I thought something was like seriously wrong with me. You know, I didn't realize that I was really being hit hard with my anxiety.
Yeah.
So, and that's when like, you know, a fork in the road opens up, and
Yep.
I was like, what the F am I doing in my life? Like, who the hell am I? Who do I think I am? I was so full of like resentment for my family, for my story. I was like egotistical as hell. I thought like I was so, what's the word for it? I felt like I was so entitled.
Yeah.
You know, I felt like the world owed me something better, you know? And at the same time, I had a subtle awareness to myself. You know, I knew that I wanted to be of service to the world and like, or my community or my close group of friends. Like, I just knew that I had something else to offer, even though it was like a tiny little candle in this like humongous, you know, pitch dark black like place that I was in. I still felt it. So, but I had stopped writing after my grandparents died. It was too much for me. It was like, you know, writing is a very alchemical process. It's like a mirror. It's like a truth detector.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the bullshit alarm. You know, it's like, it's so therapeutic. And from a young age, like it was helping me and like really speaking to like the more soulful aspects of myself. But I stopped because for a period of my life in my teenage years, I could not feel anymore. Like it was more like a survival,
like it's
mechanism.
Too much, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was way too much. And like I was suicidal. Nobody knew that. I was like extremely depressed when I was in high school. Nobody knew that. I like became another person because I thought that the person I was, like nobody wanted me. Yeah. So instead of like following what I wanted to do, which was I wanted to be like a band like nerd, you know?
Oh,
I loved being in band, and like I wanted to take art classes, and you know, I wanted to be just more subtle, and like I wanted to be like that weird artistic girl, you know? And instead of doing that, I like basically stuffed her in a closet and like locked the door with 25 locks and pulled the curtain over it so nobody knew she was there. And I like became a cheerleader.
Wow.
And completely in the opposite direction. I mean, that girl was in me, you know. I love to be enthusiastic. I love to make people smile. You know, I love to dance and move my body, but it was more of like my suit of armor.
Right.
So no one could detect who I really was. I was like this wallflower pretending to be the biggest extrovert, you know, and like people saw me as this little happy, you know, fairy girl, and they never suspected anything. You know, I pulled off the most amazing facade ever. You know, I was voted like Miss Congeniality, which fucking cracks me. Like, that's hilarious to me. Like, if anybody knew what I was thinking about myself or like how I felt, they would be like, you know, WTF, WTF.
Right.
But yeah, so life is funny.
Yeah.
Life is funny.
There's so much in your story that I relate to that just, it kind of manifested in different ways for me, because the mother wound, I feel like I had the exact opposite experience. I was so wanted that my mother put all of her projections onto me. And I always felt like I was wrong, and I didn't know why, because being me was not really what was desired. I was supposed to be my mom, a better version of her. And that manifested in very similar, you know, feelings of I was always trying to just feel okay, chronically suicidal. I didn't really know until like looking back. I actually just read some journals from like my early 20s and from high school. And I wanted to die all the time. And I didn't really know why, but it's this feeling of not being right in your own skin. And whether it's, you know, on this vast spectrum of being unwanted or too wanted, it's so interesting that the same thing can come out from that.
Definitely. I mean, thank you so much for sharing that. Seriously.
Yeah.
Like, it's so powerful. I got the goosebumps because, I mean, when we just share in this way, it is so medicinal.
Yes.
It is really so powerful. And there's something in there that, you know, you were saying like how you didn't know these things,
right?
You know, and like this is something that I'm really diving into now and like really examining myself with the language and like understanding the language of my emotions, you know, and especially for anybody, but for children, for teenagers, through the cycle of adulthood, we speak a common language, we speak another nonverbal language, and then we have this like emotional language that it's so individual and it's so personal and it's something that requires vulnerability and honesty, you know, and like these are the subtleties like we pick up as humans, but we are so emotionally illiterate.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes.
Like, you know, and we're illiterate because we don't have the experience of love.
Exactly.
You know, and so I'm saying this from my own personal experience, like it has been really hard for me to talk about how I feel because when your vocabulary is limited to rejection, to abandonment, to you're not good enough, you know, you develop these self-limiting beliefs and you don't develop the language of your whole self. You're kind of stuck in one aspect of who you are. And I really think that one, you know, there are many ways to learn that language of yourself. You know, you can write, you can tell your story. And, you know, something that's so important for me is to like use my imagination, right? To imagine like the possibility of what feels impossible.
Yeah.
And imagining like what is on the other side of my pain. You know, what is beneath these traumatic stories, you know, and am I able to imagine that something else could exist, like a different world inside of me so that I can live in the external world that I really want to live in, you know, and like, yeah, I could go on and on about it. I love it though, but it's really something that, you know, I'm watching myself as closely as I can and watching how my actions deliver my emotions and like how my inner dialogue is comprehending how I feel. You know, is this an old default definition or is it something that is truthful?
Yeah, there's so much I want to respond to in there. Where am I going to go? Well, when you mentioned, you know, sharing our stories together, I think that that's a piece that can help us create more of a common language with emotion. Because like you said, everyone's emotional language is very different. It's very subjective. And that's one of the interesting things I found on the podcast. You know, when you ask the same questions over and over, just hearing how people take different words in different context. Part of that is what separates us, right? Because, you know, the word healer for me is powerful and exciting and magical and mystical. And for some people, it's scary and dominating and something to run away from. And I want us to be able to, not that we have to all believe that things mean the same thing, but be able to just share a common energy around certain language, especially emotional language, because that's what's going to connect us, which is then what's going to heal us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing, you know, you were talking about kind of like finding what's on the other side of the darkness. I have the She book right in front of me, and I got to tell you, I read it when I was in a really dark place a couple months ago. And I love that that's exactly what a lot of the poems are in here is essentially finding the beauty in the pain.
Yeah, definitely. The ecstasy within the ache. Yeah.
And that I saw A Star Is Born last night. Is that in Denmark yet?
Oh my God, I want to see that.
Yeah.
I want to see that so bad. Lady Gaga, Bradley Cooper. Oh, is it good?
It's so amazing and it's so painful. I feel like there's a darkness in me, but it's not bad. It's beautiful, and that darkness kind of wants to connect with other people, other things, and it brought that part of me out last night, and it was this beautiful ache that I had inside, and I didn't know what to do with it, because that's when I would I would drink, or I would use sex inappropriately, or other things that I've done in the past, and I didn't want to do that with it. I just wanted to be with it. And it's so hard to describe, but when I read your book, I was like, oh, you have that darkness too. You know what that is.
Yes, totally. The womb of the darkness. Yeah. Yes.
Well, that's the title of the episode, The Womb of the Darkness. Done.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, I love everything you're saying. I know, for me, the word healer, I'm not completely sure what that means. Someone who heals. I'm not sure that I even necessarily qualify to call myself that, but what I do know is that my experience sharing my poetry, my prose, my quotes, my story, that it has connected me to an amazing group of people, not even a group, an amazing band of people around the world who, by reading what I've written, have found some spark of empowerment within themselves. And that doesn't really make me the healer. I'm just really wanting to live what I feel I should be doing. And I feel that my calling is to share my story so that others can perhaps see that there's another way out of this. That they're not condemned to a life of shame and guilt and self-hatred, and, that they can reclaim their creativity and their imagination and their power. Yeah. And that their story is what connects them to a world that wants to heal, a world that wants to be different, and a world that sees you as a part of a community and has dreams and aspirations, but also want to see you achieve, your dreams and aspirations. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And as you were talking, I was just thinking, I feel like there's a lot of people sharing their story right now, and that kind of being the impetus behind it. And this idea of, I share my story, other people relate to this and can connect to this. And there's also, I don't want to use the term false prophets, but I do feel like, there are people out there like you really sharing your story from an empowered place, from a place of real desire to heal oneself and help other people along those paths. But then I also feel like there's this kind of Instagram fame situation happening where people are really putting themselves out there in order to get famous and to be in front of people. And that's not bad, but it can be misleading. And I guess I'm just trying to think on my spectrum of where humans exist and the dark and the light, what we do with that. I don't know. I just said a lot of things that probably don't make any sense. And I hear Arthur going crazy over there. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like we're all having our own experience, maybe too much sometimes, to where, we think the world, revolves around us, and we don't see actually how much of an impact we are making on the world, or how much of an impact we could be making. And I think when you come across, people that you may feel are not being authentic, or maybe have a different agenda, maybe your gut is right about that. Or maybe it's triggering something, and maybe not even triggering, but waking something up in you that has had a long, hard sleep.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't always feel good to be woken up.
Right.
You know, when you're in a deep slumber. And even if that.
And Arthur's telling us that right now.
That's right. I hope you can hear me okay.
I can. It's so cute.
Podcast.
I know. I love it.
I love it too.
Oh, the baby sneezes are the cutest. That was so cute. I'm sorry.
That's totally cool.
Oh, man. I just had a cute gasm.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think when we're being triggered, I really think that it is because whether it's like injustice or in reality, it's like crazy inspiration. I think that it is waking a part of us up that has been asleep for too long. And it's like grouchy as it's waking up and a little pissed off even. But I think if you can sit with that, you can understand like, what is happening in myself to make me feel this certain way.
Yeah.
You know? And I mean, if it's just someone you don't have chemistry with, or you just don't vibe with their message, then you just move on. You know, don't let it linger, and just focus on what you want to be doing. And like, because I have spent a lot of time there, and that's why I'm saying, I'm like preaching.
Oh, okay. Hey.
Yeah, exactly. I'm preaching a little bit because I know that feeling of feeling insecure. Like I was an extremely insecure teenager, even though I hit it all.
Yeah.
I was so insecure into my 20s. Like I'm still insecure. It's something that I'm always going to be aware of and like battling in one way or another, you know, and that you have to be so careful because that is powerful. That's a powerful, powerful energy that you're playing with as well, you know, and if you believe in the, you know, equation that what you put out there is what you give back, it can be true in a lot of instances, I think, if we reflect on our lives. So, I mean, I've spent a lot of time getting jealous or being judgy.
That's mine. Judgment. Right? That's my safe space.
Super judgy, getting super unnecessarily bitchy, you know, gossiping, and like all that shit is my old self. That is just all the shit of me not feeling worthy and not feeling good enough, and seeing other people, their light is like shining on me, and I'm like, oh God, you know, I can be great and successful and, you know, beautiful on my own terms. I can do that. And then like, wait a minute, no, I can't because I'm too insecure. So it's definitely, I've definitely been there, done that.
Yeah.
Do that. Am there, you know?
Yeah. Cause it's an evolution. It's a constant, we're never going to be done.
No.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of that, how does the term wounded healer hit you?
I mean, I love it. I think it's such a beautiful, it's tragic and it's poetic. It's such a beautiful term. I think that most the people in the world that have a story, it is because they've been wounded to some degree. I mean, that's where the greatest love songs come from, the greatest poems and plays and movies and, you know, rap songs. Like it's all usually based on some really real shit, you know? And I think when you are able to tell your story in an eloquent way, when you find your own eloquence, when you let yourself, it's not like, I don't even think it's something that's really you need to find. It's just like when you let yourself step into your own eloquence and your own grace and your own authenticity and your own beauty and your own like path of radiance, I think that you become, in essence, like that wounded healer, you know?
Yeah. There really is such an ethereal quality to the way that you speak. And it's funny because sometimes when I talk to clients, I realize I have to still have my feet on the ground because sometimes all they hear coming out of my mouth is rainbows, unicorns, puppy dogs, everything's great. And I'm listening to you thinking about a client who might be like, oh yeah, you know, she's just, everything's great somewhere up in the clouds. But I am so with you because this is possible, you know? And I guess, you know, for the people who might be listening who are like, oh, this is too much rainbows and unicorns, what's keeping you from believing that there is beauty in all of these things. Because I think it's fear that gets in the way, right?
Definitely. I mean, I'm like a naturally positively charged person.
Same.
You know, and I think that that's where the rainbows and the sparkles and the unicorns come from, because that's just like in the fairiness, like that's just my natural vibration.
Yeah.
But if you can't really judge a book by its cover, because I have a really big story, and like there's a lot of trauma that has happened in my life. And I think that to whatever degree your pain is, you know, it's really up to you to choose your attitude about how you're going to look at it. And like, I have also been down that path of like, I effing hate life.
Yeah.
Like, I effing hate myself. Like, I'm ready to not be here anymore. Like, and that didn't feel good. Right. You know, that attitude did not feel good to me, to believe that this is all pointless. Right. Right. And you know, people say life is short, and it is short, but it's also very long. We spend a long time here. And when you're sad and numbing from personal experience, you're just trying to pass the time. You're trying to make the time go faster, you know, and you're waiting for that day where you're going to start again. You're going to start in a better place, and you're going to restart this great program that's going to take everything away. And that's not how I believe like your healing process works. Like, you have to be willing to start within, you know, and then everything externally will eventually support you. But if you start externally, I think you have such a bigger chance of failure. And for people like me who have like really old patterns of unworthiness, when you fail, it's not just like a little failure, it's like an epic fail. Right. You know, and I would punish myself for months and weeks, you know, for failing, but really setting myself up to fail and then failing. So I think it's just, you know, if you want to look at life as being really shitty because of what has happened to you, you can by all means, you know, choose that. And I guess I would say more than anything, like, I'm sorry if I'm going off right now.
No, go on.
I was just, you know, like, yes, instead of, I don't know, feeling like you have to be happy or feeling like you need to fight your sadness. Like, I came to this conclusion, you know, last year when I was in a really dark, you know, place before I got pregnant with my second child. And I was like, you know, fuck this, like, fuck happiness. Like, why am I constantly chasing this feel good, you know, feeling? And then when I'm in a low, I'm like fighting it as well. Like, how do I get through this? How do I get over it? And instead of going for either or, like, why don't we just choose empowerment? Like, why can't I just be empowered by this state of being, you know, by whatever's passing through emotionally, whatever is passing through physically, emotionally, spiritually? Can I just be with it, and can I be empowered by it? That's really given me a lot of fuel for, you know, becoming like even more creative, like diving deeper into rhymes and the rhythms of my words, but also like how I live my life, you know, how I walk, how my feet move, how, you know, like how my eyes look and how my words come out of my mouth, you know?
And Arthur agrees.
Yes.
Yeah. And something you said that I wanted to just add a little piece to this idea of choosing how you're gonna take what life throws at you. I remember my mom always saying that, like, you know, you can choose how you feel. And I remember being so angry at her because when she was telling me, what I heard it as was this invalidation of what I'm actually experiencing, and I should just pretend to be happy all the time. And so I like that you said it's not this idea to just pretend that everything's okay or push the sadness away, but it's to use that in conjunction with the fortune and the misfortune, putting those together and that creates empowerment.
Yes, definitely. And it comes back to, becoming emotionally literate and becoming, familiar with the cycles of your body, the cycles of your emotions, and being present with the unexpected. And a lot of times I also think, parents and certain friends and certain people, they don't have time for us to share our emotions, or they don't know how to hold space for other people to be emotional. So they want to shut it down, as soon as possible, or they feel like guilty because they don't have an answer that's going to make you change or feel better or get into a state that they can deal with, And I think that's also, one of my core themes and what I do here in Copenhagen and with, women's groups and, also in my poetry and my words is that we really all can benefit from learning how to hold space for each other, and hearing each other out and not taking other people's feedback or their stories, personally. And that's really hard.
Yeah.
And you have to really hold your heart in like a super golden place to do that. But that requires, presence. It requires a lot of a belief in yourself and like a presence to be able to hold space for other people. And like knowing that we don't have to fix anybody.
Right.
And like, we don't have to have the solutions, even for our most beloved ones, to feel better. That the magic really happens is when you hold a loving space for someone to just get whatever they need to get out of their system, or to let them sit in their system,
Right.
And that's really, that's a magical experience.
And you're describing real empathy, and where people screw up empathy is, like you said, taking it personally somehow, not being able to put your own story aside enough to sit with somebody else and see them clearly. Because so often, we've got our lenses on that our story says that things are a certain way. But if somebody's telling you, no, this is how I feel, you have to put your own stuff aside in order to really understand that.
Yes.
And you're so right that a lot of the struggle comes from the desire to fix and make it better, partly because we care and we want people to feel better, but also because we're uncomfortable sitting with people's pain, because then that means you have to look at your own pain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have to feel it within your own body. Yeah. You have to be willing to feel it. And like, it's definitely a fascinating thing for me. And my perspective, I love holding space. I feel like I am a great space holder.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons that is true is because when I hear another person's story, my mind doesn't default to the judgment.
Right.
My mind defaults on like, oh, wow, like this is how another person interprets life.
Yeah.
Like this is like just a collage for me. It's just like fuel for even a broader and bigger imagination of what is possible, because we're not all having the same experience. And that's what makes it so cool to have a human life, is that all of us truly have our own stories going on that collide and weave and paint strokes on this bigger book of life of us.
Well, that's what I find so fascinating about psychology, is that we're all having these really specific experiences, but at the same time, they're the same. Because that's how we can, do any sort of psychology, because human behavior is so predictable and human emotions they're finite. There's a finite amount of emotions, but there's infinite ways that they can be expressed and experienced.
Exactly. Totally. Yeah. And like the predictable stuff is the textbook stuff.
Right.
It's the stuff that we're taught and programmed to live like whatever kind of normal standard life. Like that's what makes us more predictable. It's when we go outside of these boxes where we become unpredictable and imaginative, and we become more risky, and life becomes something different. And our interactions become more interesting, and they become more alive, and like the discussion and the conversations take you places that you haven't been before.
Right. That's the magic.
That's the magic.
Yeah. Well, I really want to give you a chance to talk about, Eat My Stardust or Thug Unicorn, or anything that you really want to share with people where other people can bask in your sparkle.
Yes. Well, I have my first compilation is out, the She Book, and I self-published last December, and then it was picked up by a publisher just a few months ago. So we're going to see like a second wave of that.
Oh, great.
Really excited about, and that is available on Amazon if anybody is interested. And I have a new course that is going to start on January 21st. And it's an online experience, and it is about telling your story to the most important person in your life, and that's you, and learning or being inspired, supported to find the courage to let your story out, to give it air, to let it breathe, to see what it looks like on paper, and what happens when all of that pain or the trauma, your story is on paper. What are you going to do with the space inside of you? Like, how does that feel, and how are we going to fill it? And what else does it have to reveal? It's really the journey to the other side of pain. And I have an amazing community that joins these writing groups. And someone just had written me today and said, you really have attracted some amazing people to these groups. And I'm so honored to be a part of it. And I was like, that is so true. This group of people are just, I really haven't experienced it before. And it's online, and it is so powerful. Like, the connections run so deep, and everybody is there for each other, and if you're asking a question, like, there aren't crickets. There's just all these like really sincere responses, and an amazing ability to share. So yeah, that's happening, and that's at eatmystardust.com. And I'm going to be making a special announcement probably in December or the beginning of next year. I'm going to have my first live invitation. So a live experience, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be at a castle. Yes. So I'm going to be sharing that with everybody really soon. And that would be just amazing. I can't even imagine what that's going to feel like. So I'm really looking forward to that as well.
I can hear your smile. You're so excited.
Yeah. I'm so excited. Like, I cannot wait. So.
Oh, that's amazing. As we kind of wrap this up, Tanya, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure to share with listeners today?
I would just say to everybody, like, take care of yourself. I know it's not always easy, but give yourself a little love today, whatever that means to you, for you. Just a little more love, a little more self-love.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. This was great. This was really, you got me really going. So
yay!
Thank you so much. I loved it. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I really hope you enjoyed that interview with Tanya. Afterwards, I feel like I was just sparkled with unicorn fairy dust. I hope you feel the same way. One interesting tidbit that Tanya shared with me after we stopped the recording is that Thug Unicorn is not her, but Thug Unicorn is her protector, which I thought was awesome. She's like, who would want to mess with a Thug Unicorn? And we're both like, nobody, because she's a badass. So thank you so much again, Tanya, for being part of Conversations with the Wounded Healer. Thank you as always to Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios for editing. Thank you to Liam O'Donnell for the awesome album art photo, and to Ben Mueller for our theme music. To find more information about Tanya or any of our other guests, you can go to www.headhearttherapy.com/podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next time.